is a story called When Galaxies Collide. There once was a girl called Alice. She was studying a language from a distant galaxy in college with her good friend Abby, and there were 4 boys in the classroom with her. She looked at one of the boys, and he resembled a poster behind him of Mr. Hanson. He was the king of the land, a keeper of knowledge. He owned a great big space station in the centre of England. There were rumours that he spent a lot of his time in pharmacies. Now Alice and her friend Abby were discussing New Year's Eve parties. There was going to be a great big party at a mansion, and Alice decided to get tickets. It was the night of the party. Alice invited her friends around to her parents' house, and they were all sat in the living room. Her friend June was wearing a fairy outfit and a garland in her hair. Syringes were all on the floor, and they were all laid out, zoning out. Alice stood at the edge, holding a cup of soup. Just then, a train came into the room, and a group of Russian boisterous men hurried past Alice. "Careful, it's hot!" She lifted up the soup, and the men went onto the train, followed by the primatologist, Dr. Gordegas, who'd studied the orangutans in Borneo. The train left the room. Alice looked to her left. There was Nancy Spungen, the deceased girlfriend of Sid Vicious, wearing a black and white pinstripe suit. She rushed in and grabbed the soup, began to drink it, and she was dancing and singing as she moved through the room. Alice could see her parents in the kitchen. They were discussing on where to go, but Alice didn't ask them. They were mysterious types. She picked up the broom and began to clean up. Soon it was midnight. It was time to head to the party. They made their way to the mansion. Alice headed underground, down in the house. And there was a dance floor and people were singing and dancing and drinking. One of the boys from her class asked her to dance, but Alice was feeling hungry, so she made her way to the bar and ordered a bowl of beans. She began to eat the beans and they dripped down her hands. She had no fork. "The beans are supposed to be in the bowl, you know." Alice turned. It was Jay-Z. It was that kind of party. "Garam Sarami, for all that happens to me," said Alice, evoking words from a distant galaxy which meant thank you. She looked to her right. A TV crew had just appeared. They were interviewing the barman, who was an actor from a famous English gangster movie. The man lifted his microphone over the bar. "What are you doing here, mate?" The man continued to pour. "Eh?" "That's 7.40, please," said the barman. Alice looked at the till. It said 11.10. Was he going to get the right change? It was getting late. Alice was feeling tired. She decided to make her way up to the bedrooms. She looked up the stairs. She noticed 2 women, completely drunk, wearing 1920s clothing. Come on, join us," they said. And Alice joined them up to one of the shops. It was full of perfumes and incense and crystals. But the 2 women had wandered back down to the stairs. "Alice, come over here and look. The pig, it's vomiting." Alice went to the banister and peered over. "It's because it's eaten rhizomes. They can't eat them, they've got to vomit them back out." Nobody knew what rhizomes were, apart from Alice. She knew that they were stems that grew underground like ginger. But why were the pigs suddenly allergic? She made her way towards the bedrooms, which were almost all full Everybody was sleeping. One of the ladies was folding up sheets, and Alice decided to help. Her daughter kept complaining, "She's doing it wrong." "Oh, she's fine," said the mum, as Alice continued to fold the sheets. "However, I could do with some nail varnish remover." Alice offered to help and went to the pharmacy. She walked inside, picked up the nail varnish remover. She could hear a familiar sound. She looked to her left, and there, stood by the hand creams, looking at the products and all of the ingredients, was Mr. Hanson. She didn't want to be seen. She crept past him, went up to the till, paid for the nail varnish remover, and went back to the lady to give it to her. It was getting very late now. Alice decided that she would make her way round the back of the mansion. At the back of the mansion, two bakers were holding platters. "Marijuana donuts! Come get your marijuana donuts!" But no one wanted them. Alice made her way. There was a table where the bakers had laid out lots of fresh cakes, full of creams. Yet Alice didn't eat dairy. She saw an apple strudel and she began to eat it. Lots of people were turning up, doing workshops for Mr. Hanson's space station, and Alice decided that she would do her own workshop in this great veranda. She got out a piece of paper and she popped it on the table, and there she gave a workshop about how to make curry. The sun was now beginning to rise, and she went out of the veranda into the garden. She saw her friend June slumped on the wall, completely drunk. "Sometimes all it takes is a drunk message saying, 'I think you're gorgeous,'" said June. She was clearly and deeply in love with someone, and she was slurring as she kept talking about him, but Alice didn't know what to say. Her friend Abby arrived, and the three friends decided to find somewhere to sleep. They got in the car. "I know a place," said Alice. "It's an abandoned shed. Come on, let's go." They made their way to the shed. They tried to open the door, but it was locked, so they sat down on a picnic table outside. And there they chatted for what seemed like hours, and suddenly the door burst open. "Surprise!" It was Sylvia, Alice's sister. "Have you been waiting in there the whole time to do that?" said Alice. "Yeah, surprise!" said Sylvia. Her hair was covered in flowers, bright colours. It looked like Play-Doh. "And is that Play-Doh in your hair?" "Yeah, I'll show you." Sylvia brought out her craft pack, popped it on the table, and they all began to style their hair. Alice was feeling very tired. It was time to head home. She made her way back to the house. But there, in the garden, was her mother, looking absolutely terrified, and two elderly friends, Vaughan and Linda. They were all too terrified to speak, and they pointed at the house. Alice made her way towards the door. Her heart was beating. Boom, boom, boom. She placed her hand on the door. She opened it. There was a terrible stench, a gloom, a darkness. She made her way into the kitchen. She couldn't believe her eyes. Rows and rows of cages full of orcs. They were rattling the bars, sneering, spitting. Alice looked to her right. There was a big gate in front of the dining room, and behind the gate was the great big captain of the Orcs, made by Saruman himself. He had a white hand on his face, sharp, small teeth. He breathed deeply as he stared at her. Alice backed away. She closed the door and went back out into the garden. I don't like the look of that gate. I don't think it's strong enough, said Alice to Vaughan. I know, I agree, said Vaughan. But it was too late. They suddenly heard a great crunching sound, and the kitchen door flung open. Out he came. He stared down the garden. He had long black dreadlocks, big muscles. Alice quickly picked up a plank of wood underneath one of the holly trees and threw it at him. It hit his chest and bounced off without even making a scratch. He picked up a plank of wood and he threw it at Alice, and she dodged. Then something curious happened. He began to transform. He was turning into a human. He had big muscles, strong cheekbones. She looked at his face. Didn't he work in Holland and Barrett? What was going on? But there was no time to think. They ran down the garden, back to the shed, climbed up onto the roof, leapt over into the neighbour's garden. What was going on? How could there be orcs in the land? What was Mr. Handsome doing at the space station? Alice knew that she needed to tell them. She made her way to the space station, but news hadn't reached the space station just yet. It was about to go into lockdown. At a certain time each night, all of the doors would close, the alarms would come on and everybody would leave the building. 4 friends had volunteered to be security guards. They were exploring the strange rooms, when suddenly, they had 4 minutes and 10 seconds to get down the stairs. 2 friends shot forward, made their way underneath the section doors, and they were out. But the 2 friends at the back hadn't made it. They slumped down at the door. They knew that there would be no point in telling anyone, or they could lose their jobs. "You guys go on ahead, I've got a book," said one of the friends. But the other friend had noticed a little passageway. They decided to follow it. It led out into St. Andrew's Hospital. There in the waiting room were a group of patients, and they looked at the security guards with curiosity. One of the patients stood up. "Come with me." She led them round a corner. And there was a security guard from East Timor. He had a knowing smile. He led them back into the space station. He lifted up the sectional doors, and the 2 friends left. The security guard had a knowing smile. It was as if a lot of people got caught on the 4-minute stairs. He closed the sectional doors, the alarms went on, and the space station went down into quiet darkness. Sylvia and Alice had made their way to the space station. But realising that it was in shutdown, they decided to wait in one of the nearby warehouses. Others had also congregated. They had seen the orcs and they were terrified. One man was completely drunk, his arms waving in the air. He was foaming at the mouth. His eyes were red. Sylvia and Alice managed to get him down onto one of the abandoned beds, and they wrapped him up, kept him safe. And they went up to the receptionist in the warehouse. "We've got to get him to the hospital. This is a lockdown situation," said Sylvia to the receptionist. The receptionist picked up her phone. She called the hospital, but she refused to mention that it was a lockdown situation. "Please, you've got to say it. It's a lockdown situation," said Sylvia. But again, the nurse refused to say it. "This is hopeless. We've got to get in there ourselves," said Sylvia. Sylvia and Alice pushed the hospital bed out of the warehouse and made their way towards St. Andrew's Hospital. As they went, Sylvia put a teddy bear on her left shoulder, and as they moved she skipped and danced. They made their way past a group of girls who were building sandcastles. The girls looked up at Sylvia in awe, and they waved goodbye. Sylvia and Alice pushed the great hospital bed up a mountain pass. Clouds were coming down. "I can feel them. I can feel the sensations," said Alice as she felt the clouds on her feet. Soon they had come to a fork in the road. Sylvia took the bed to the right up to St Andrew's Hospital, and Alice took the road to the left, thinking it would lead back to the space station. She made her way up the paths. It seemed like hours. Finally she made her way into London, into Trafalgar Square, which was now a great big roundabout. She looked in front of her, and there was a great big head. It had been carved by mystics in stone in the year 2017. Its eyes peered out into the vast distance. It must have been 30 foot tall, and Alice stared at it in awe. Suddenly, she could see the lips moving. "Hello, Alice." She looked to see if anyone else had noticed. No one had seen anything. She went closer. She pressed her ear to the lips. "Mr. Handsome cannot be trusted," said the great big head. Alice nodded. "Would you like to see something?" said the head. "Yes," said Alice. "Then take hold of my head." Alice felt apprehensive. What was going to happen? The head began to tip backwards, and Alice peered down the mouth to a great big tunnel. It led into the space station. The head dropped her back down. She looked to see if anyone had noticed. Nothing. And suddenly, crack! The great big head fell down from its vessel and began to roll off into the distance. A naked man tauntingly laughed. Alice couldn't believe it. "The head! The head has fallen!" she yelled, watching as the head span away. Why had no one noticed? "The head has fallen!" said Alice as she ran to the roundabout. Cars were speeding round. Why had no one noticed? Suddenly, a car pulled up. The windows were wound down. A group of American tourists asked her what had happened. "The head has fallen!" said Alice as she pointed at the great vessel where the head should be. It was too much. How could the head have fallen? She needed to leave the city. She made her way to the eco-community of Rawn and Linda in the west of Ireland. When she arrived, she was invited to take a walk, and she made her way over the boardwalks through the rainforest. She could hear the sound of cicadas. Every time they made a sound, she could hear the wind blowing in the trees, and she could see their bodies glowing with light. As she followed the boardwalk, she saw a pavilion at the end. It looked Japanese in appearance. She made her way inside, and there was a priest wearing a decorated vestment, drinking tea. He smiled. "How does it feel to be on your path?" Alice nodded. She made her way back out, moved through the forest. It felt wonderful connecting with the elements again in the forest. But she had heard the latest news reports. Orcs had overtaken the land in England. The land had turned into a wasteland. And Mr. Hanson was spending all of his time in pharmacies. She knew that she needed to get into nature alone this time. And so she decided to head to the land of her ancestors, the mountains of Connemara. She took her backpack and a tent, and she camped next to a great river on the mountainside. She was surrounded by black-faced mountain sheep. One day, as she was sat by the river, a little gnome in a small cart passed on a track leading up into the mountain, and she decided to follow him. She made her way up the mountain, down into the mountain, and into this great shaft lit by torches. There, at the bottom of the shaft, was a great big purple door. decorated with ancient symbols. "May I enter?" said Alice. "You may," said the door. Alice opened the door and stepped inside. A great big squid swept past her. "You can breathe in here," said a fish as it swam by. Alice couldn't believe it. She began to swim and made her way down to a sandy seabed. There, in the distance, was a castle, and she made her way up through the undulating seaweed towards the door. There, she knocked on the door. A little butler opened it. He had pink skin and little tail. "Hello, we've been expecting you. Come on in," said the butler. He led her into a great big hall. It was a glass-walled hall, and Alice sat down on a great big table. There were many guests, and in front of her was a man with a grey moustache and a suit, and a lady on the right with a yellow Victorian outfit with lace trimmings. In front of Alice was a platter, a silver platter, and the butler lifted it up. Ta-da! Alice looked. The platter was empty. There was nothing to eat it, and she knew it was time to leave. And so she made her way back up to the mountain. She went through the purple door, up the shaft, and came out of the mountain. She looked to the right, and there was a great gushing river. She followed it, and it led out to one of the most beautiful places she had ever seen. A great plateau between two mountains. It was a green, luscious field, full of black-faced mountain sheep, and little lambs skipping and playing in the hills. There she made her camp next to the river. She felt such peace in her heart. But that night, a terrible storm hit the valley. The wind came at high speeds, hitting her tent like a bullet. Rain came down in thick torrents. Alice looked out her tent. The river was rapidly rising. She quickly packed up her tent and made her way down the valley. Her clothes were soaking wet, and her bag was drenched. Suddenly she saw a little house, a small cottage with a thatched roof, and she made her way up to the door. A lady opened it and welcomed her inside. "Come, come, rest." Alice sat down on a sheepskin rug. She placed blankets over her and dried herself by the fire. The Lady Mary made her tea over the iron stove on the turf-fed fire, and Alice told her story as fog began to descend on the valley. "You were lucky. Not even us locals go out in the fog. You can get lost so easy," said Mary. And there Alice stayed until the fog began to leave. She helped collecting milk, and making butter, and collecting turf. Soon the fog had begun to go, and Mary gave Alice a small lamb. "Here, take this, and give it to Mr. Hanson." Alice took the lamb. "There is one more thing," said Mary. "It will not be easy to give the lamb to Mr. Hanson, but you must not stop until you do." Alice nodded, took the lamb and a bottle of milk. She made her way on the buses back to England. The land had been overtaken by Orcs. There were security posts everywhere, armed forces. Alice made her way straight to the space station and the nearest pharmacy. And you won't guess who she saw inside. There he was, stood by the headache packets, reading all of the ingredient listings. Alice placed the lamb down in the aisle next to him. "I have a gift for you," said Alice. Mr. Hanson continued reading all of the ingredients. "Look, I know this sounds strange," said Alice, "but I have a gift for you." Mr. Hanson now turned to look at the indigestion packets. and he continued to read all of the ingredients. Alice could feel this wildness moving up. "Hey! I have a gift for you!" said Alice as she pointed at the lamb. Mr. Hanson turned and looked at the small lamb. He picked it up. He held it next to his suit. "Thank you." The months passed by. The Orcs had left the land and returned to their caves deep underground, and the land was blossoming again. Alice had moved house and was living with her two friends, Abby and June. And she was sat on the computer on eBay, and she was looking at a book which had just been released by the space station. It was their greatest work. She looked at the blurb at the back. If we study high-level mathematics according to the variable ways in which our brains function, anyone can understand. Realising that she was a very visually minded person, Alice turned to the appropriate chapter. And there was a description by a computer called Jupiter, which had been developed by the space station. 2 galaxies were colliding, and the electromagnetic field of the planet Venus had been distorted. And the computer explained that no matter how much this field was distorted, it would continue to function, because the electromagnetic poles would continue to pulse with light, and these poles were etched into the fabric of time and space. Alice closed the book. She looked at the front cover. There was a picture of a man wearing a suit. His eyes were glinting. He had a smile on his face. She didn't recognise him at first, but then she realised it was him, the Keeper of Knowledge. It was Mr. Hanson. Thank you.